And I did that, Kendra probably remembers, I had some trouble right around the edges of the map, especially in areas that were not park property and no one had done research on those properties, figuring out what they were. And I remember we had trouble with the one in A1, and still I don't remember if it should be on this map or it's one of those letters that's off the map. So there are 11 structures, or groups of structures. And then what I did is I made an index card for every structure. So here is number 6 out of 195, and it's an A1. And I have my cards here tonight in case anybody wants to ask a question about a farm. And then I compared what the name of the property owner was as it is shown on maps that exist of the battlefield. And you can see the Warren map at the top, which is the best source for information on anything like this, doesn't have it listed. It's a property that is shown as a building, but it is blank. This is the Whistler House, by the way. The first shot marker is on the property of this house. I know it's there. It's unknown. I should point out that there are many houses on the Warren map that are shown, but not labeled. And you wouldn't believe how much credence over the years people have given to, like, the concept, if it's not labeled, it's not there. So in other words, if it wasn't labeled, people don't talk about it. If it's not labeled, nobody cares to find out who lived there. And if it's not labeled, most people leave it off the map. So if something wasn't labeled, it doesn't get any attention when we're talking about the battle a lot of times. And what I found out, it's just not labeled because they didn't label it or they didn't talk to somebody who lived there. Keep in mind, we're literally talking about the surveyors. I guess they stopped at every house and asked who lived there when they made their map. Is that amazing? Well, they're supposed to. What if that guy wasn't home? What if the house abandoned? What if the house burned down during the battle? Just some issues. So then I took the Cope 1863 map. In the Atlas, the Civil War OR Atlas, they have a real nice version of this map. They have the original at the Library of Congress. But Emmer B. Cope, who was a staff officer with General Warren, spent some time after the battle. I think he says like 21 days. Maybe I'm wrong. He rode around the battlefield on horseback with an 1858 wall map, and he reproduced the battlefield, and he stopped and talked to people, and he found out who lived in the houses. And his research appears on this map, and he shows it as E. Whistler, which is correct. Now then I took the John Batchelder, the 3 days of fighting maps that were done in 1876. John Batchelder took the Warren map survey, and then he added troops to it. And he made a first, a second, and a third day map. And it shows the whole first day, the whole second day, the whole third day. And he made improvements to who lived in some of the properties, which is fascinating. Now, he didn't do it a lot for people that lived on the far perimeter of the field, but on the main battlefield, he occasionally made changes or made notes as to the person living there. And they were based on his research. So he shows it as J. Goodamuth. Then the 1858 map shows it, that's a wall map of Adams County, and it shows it as E. Whistler and Smith Shop. I see AD there. That's not my handwriting. Andrew Dalton has been playing with my note card. He must have just done that. And then 1872 Atlas is J. Lott, Jacob Lott, not to be confused with his brother, Noah Lott. which is one of my favorite names on the battlefield. That's really his name. No, will not. You have to look it up. So, and then this is what I did that really contributed to the success, or if you well-being of this project, is then I went to the tax record and I figured out who owned each of the farms based on what I was looking at. And like, for instance, if the map is all one name, you can bet that that's the person who owned it at the time. But if it's different, then I have to try to figure out, why it's different. And you can look in the tax records and see year by year. And then also the tax records are going to give you the first name of the guy. So you can figure out who owns it. And sure enough, Ephraim Whistler owns the house in which the first shot of the battle was fought on the Chambersburg Turnpike. I find it interesting that on this map, there are two different ways to get from the Chambersburg Pike across the railroad tracks. There's a bridge, today on Belmont Road, right where the number 5 is. But to the left of it, they must have also had a road that went across and down into the cut and up the other side. Which, if you stand there and look, that must have been really difficult. Or maybe there's an old bridge that was dilapidated and they were building a new bridge. That bridge is often closed and you can't go across that road. Have you noticed that? Yeah, I think it's open at the moment. So then I gave Tom a map with numbers on it, where I, with all my numbers, and then I told him, what name to put above the house. And you can see, as it went on, I changed my mind in several instances. Sometimes the tax assessor would give the guy's first name, like you can see, Lewis, and his name was really Lewis. So it's just a matter of spelling. And then I eliminated some and added some, and so then then when I got back the proofs, and how proofs are, I had like a day before they went to the printer to find mistakes and have them changed, and I don't know, maybe it was more than a day, but there were lots of mistakes. So you can see, like, I highlighted them and changed them what I wanted to. And then we have the final project. In A1, I think we started with 11 groups of buildings and 3 letters off the map, and I think we ended up with 7 different farms in that area. And I think we talked about that one's got to go back on eventually. There's really 8. I think one of the letters is, I had Altamap, and I think it's on the map. But I think it's a great project, trying to figure out who lived where at the time. Now, there are all in this kind of project, there's all kinds of things that happen. There's all kinds of other people putting their hands in your project and changing it, and they don't know how much time you put into it. So, I'd put out a map, people would make corrections, and of course, I would have to make corrections or corrections. You should have came last week, Mark. I talked about you specifically in the program.
How you doing, brother?
Good.
Yeah.
Do you remember him from the movie Gettysburg? Because that was last week's program. He's the one who yells, Fredericksburg. Okay. You can get your picture with him later. So, for instance, here is E3, and you can see in my notes I have Michael Bushman, and then I have Essick is the tenant in parentheses, and I say check the claims file to myself because I couldn't, I knew his name of the tenant was listed on one of the claims files, and like here's my card, and I have Michael Bushman, and then at the bottom the map said J.F. Essick in the coat map. But I didn't think that was right. On the note on the right, I have a note. You know, check this name, the first name, and then at the top I have David or Henry. Then I remember, and eventually I figured out that his name was David Essick, not to be convinced with the singer from the 1970s. Do you remember him? What did he do? David Essick? I can think of it. I can't think of his name. Okay, so here is a good example. So I got the proof back, and I was like, okay, is it David? And then I checked it, and sure enough, it was David. And so I highlighted it, and I was like, great. I didn't even notice that Tom had put George Bushman instead of Michael Bushman. And I went back, of course, and looked at my notes later when somebody pointed it out. You know, all my notes say Michael Bushman. I have no idea how George got on there. Actually, that's not true. I know exactly how he got on there. So this is what, and I was at his house when he was doing this map sometimes. So what Tom would do is he wouldn't like create a field and retype something. We've all done this, I'm sure, if we have these kind of programs on a computer. You copy and paste something that's already there, you copy it, you paste it, and then you just change the name. Because that way it'll save the lettering and the format and the size. You don't have to redo it. So he just copied a George Weichert or something like that and dropped it there and changed the last name and forgot to change the first name. So there are mistakes on the map. And you know, there are sometimes when you're editing something, you're trying to catch as much as you can, and you can't catch everything.